Hello, everyone. Wow, after all this time, here we are again. I hope everybody can hear me and that everything shows up just nice. Uh, it's taken a little bit of schooling for me to get sort of back in the saddle to learn how to use all this stuff that's all around me and keep it coordinated and synchronized. So many things have happened in the last year plus. I sort of apologize for kind of feeling like I've left everybody in the lurch all of a sudden. But over a year ago, I had a health crisis landed me in the hospital. I went through sort of the dark night of the medical system, through all the gears and grindstones. So I got a good up close and personal look at the core of the medical system and how it works, in about the top way that you can. I'm out the other side and I'm doing well. I am still in the tail end of a treatment plan that will last another 6 months or so. A side effect of that is sort of fatigue and loss of stamina and running out of steam a little fast. But with doing work on myself and holistic approaches, things are well. And so many things have changed. And I know that if they've changed in my life, then they've changed in your life, because I'm not unique. Actually, that's wrong. I am unique in the universe, but it's a bell curve. And we're all, linked together through spooky action at a distance. We're entangled because our consciousnesses meet this way. And we've aligned our brainwaves together on multiple occasions. A scientific way of aligning brainwaves to create a mind link. And once again, for those of you who might be new, make sure you have a pair of headphones handy, because at the end we listen to a soundtrack together. And the purpose of that is to entrain our brainwaves all into a single exact space together. Part of that has to do with the concept of the 100th monkey idea, where you get a minimum number of people's ideas aligned together, and you can shift the quantum field. This is a much larger discussion that we have talked about a number of times in previous broadcasts. The place where reality meets expectation. Deep down under the hood, where I don't have conscious and rational control. Conscious rational control in my ordinary thinking mind. I call that small mind. Big mind, the part of me that is aligned with the present and doesn't work in time and space as this part understands, interacts with the quantum interface with the universe at large, and the universe responds to my expectation of what I think the next moment is going to be. And therefore it becomes this, because all of us at some deep collective unconscious level are aligning together in a global mind. And that global mind is the one who, by sort of consensus vote, decides on what reality looks like. And so we all participate together under the hood at some magnificently gigantic quantum field level to dictate the next moment from now by our expectation of what reality is and what it looks like and how we experience it. So if we can get enough minds aligned together with a new idea of what reality could be, then we have the possibility of tipping the scale at a quantum field and making this new reality pop into existence, similar to the concept of a global spontaneous remission. Just like, you can have a cancer tumor here and all of a sudden it's gone and the x-rays show nothing and the doctors are scratching their heads thinking, well, maybe I looked at the wrong x-ray. That's about as far as the Newtonian mind can stretch to try to encompass non-Newtonian ideas like quantum ideas. But in the quantum world, things go forwards and backwards in time. The present is constantly shifting. We've got, living/dead cats in a box in the Schrödinger cat paradox. The world is a possibility to be something, but it doesn't pop into whatever that possibility might be until consciousness arrives on the scene. In this case, it's global, under the hood, networked, big mind that encompasses all of us, the grand collective unconscious mind that we're all part of. And I think we can all agree, if anybody watches the news, that we are in a grand time of transition from something that we are now to something that's going to be new. The kind of thing that it always looks like when we're in a transition from one state to another. And I would suspect that that's the same thing that happens in a spontaneous remission. There's a twilight zone transition state between me as a person with cancer and me as a person who doesn't have it anymore. It's sort of an outside of time and space event that is timeless and spaceless. And so I sort of see that as a slow-mo version of what we're looking at in the world, as the world goes through a fairly hair-raising and strange and weird transition on many fronts. And it's my belief that we have the chance of using science and technology along with ancient understandings to bring to bear a new approach to our place in the universe and how we and the universe work together in a partnership to mold reality. Instead of us being passive and reality becoming active as a result of that. When the universe is active, then it's the law of chance. The dice roll and the next moment shows up and I react to that. The universe rolls the dice and I react to what happens, as opposed to me becoming clear deep in myself about what kind of world do I want in my personal sphere and in the sphere at large, in the planet at large. What do I want that to look like? If I can flesh that picture out as an emotional, evocative visualization, then I start to put pressure on the universe instead of the other way around. I'm putting forth a pressure wave from inside of me of a vision I have about what I would like this organization or the world to be like as an experience. And then the universe becomes passive to me. I become a force in the universe to change and shift my life. I have no idea what the mechanics are going to look like of how the universe accomplishes that change. I don't know what time frame it's going to end up being for that change to take place. But if I can get successfully into the right place in myself before a thought, in the present moment, aligned with what's happening right now, and introduce into that this emotionally evocative visualization of what I want reality to be, then that is the sort of co-partnership that goes on between consciousness and the universe, that the universe says yes to it and delivers it up. Sort of like God says you can have anything you want. All you have to do is ask for it, without words, before a thought. And that means it has to be this present moment kind of imagining of what it would feel like if everything was perfect, if my life was perfect, if the world itself was a wonderful place to live in, without all this strife and trauma and innuendo and corruption. From one standpoint, as Carl Jung once said, the external world is a projection of my deep collective unconscious mind, that all of us in the network of big mind are witnessing on a projector screen our own troubled soul in the news, in the world, in my personal life. And therefore it really is true that in order to change the world, I have to change myself. I have to work on myself. I have to do something inside of me to make that true. And it certainly has been the big lesson of my life in this past year plus, facing a life-threatening condition of disease. And it certainly wasn't lost on me that, I'm, quote, the great Dr. Thompson guy who knows all of these esoteric secrets about everything and has been in a high-level, high-tech, holistic health practice as a doctor with people who have come to me from all over the world with all kinds of different conditions, and all of them are gnarly. I'm the witch doctor at the end of the trail that other people come to. And yet it didn't protect me. That I also, even with the knowledge that I know, can still get caught. So it was a deep lesson for me that, with the stresses and the tensions that happened to me in the year preceding, I got distracted and I let go of the wheel and got whacked up the side of the head. Another lesson chalked up for me. It's a good thing. It's a humbling experience, and it brings you back to, you might know a lot, but you're still in the mix like anybody and everybody else. Sobering lesson for all of us. So all kinds of incredibly good things have happened as a result of this, because once again, change is inevitable and you can't stop the change. And at the period of time leading up to this health collapse I had, I was attempting once again to withdraw from my clinical practice that was taking up all my time, when the universe was banging on my door and letting me know that there was more important works that I had to do for the greater good. and that the universe wasn't getting the best bang out of the buck of just me seeing individual people in a little room in a clinic, that my real work had now graduated to another place, and I had to make that transition to teaching practitioners how to use this system that has come through me, or that I've been drafted to do. And I was being held back from being able to train the people I need to train, and to manage that system and to be there for them. That was taking up more and more of my time. So it was becoming very difficult for me to withdraw from practice, because the people who had been coming to me were desperate and had no other place to go. They had been every place else, and I was the end of the trail. And so it's not like I can just sell my practice and turn my patients over to other doctors, because who are those people going to be? Who else can I turn them to? That was my struggle. So in a sense, the universe stepped in and said, okay, it's time for us to help. My circle of elders up there. Yeah. Okay, we got to help this guy. Let's give him some kind of, disease that will knock him right out of the saddle, so he has to retire, so that we can get this job done. And essentially that's what happened. It was like me back in the 70s, talking myself out of going to chiropractic school. And so a circle of elders up there stepped in and helped me out by burning my house down. And I lost everything. But the insurance money was just enough to travel to Iowa and first and last month rent and buy some textbooks. And all of a sudden I had the means to do it, and I could travel light. So I sort of have this weird working relationship with the universe at large, where I tend to be the stupidest smart guy in the room, where I might be brilliant in this sphere and dumb in another sphere, where I just can't get myself to move forward. So my helpers help me out, and it's kind of, well, he's not going to like it. I mean, it's going to be painful. It's going to be ugly. And he goes, yeah, but he'll survive. And so here I am. All my tests have come back negative. I'm clean and clear. I'm at the tail end of sort of one injection I still have to take, and that kind of keeps me down. But I'm working hard. There's all kinds of projects going on. We've created 3 new companies. And now we've got 5 companies. Shay is the CEO and manages all of them. God bless his soul. He also builds the computers for the recording studios and to run all the systems. He designs the websites. He's a sound engineer. We work together. We're creating a whole series of new albums. I have a bunch that I already have worked on, had created the soundtracks. We've created the covers. I'll get into that in a minute. What are these various companies we have? We now have a global network of over 130 practitioners all over the world doing biotuning with patients all over the world. It's exciting, and it's growing. And that group of practitioners are in constant contact with each other through something called Discord that makes it easy for communities of people to talk together and share information. There's a lot of questions, and our team is there to answer. I'm there to answer. It's a movement to change the face of healthcare in the world with a science-based holistic model that can challenge the medical model for what is the true cause of disease, which we believe is stress. Stress is the cause of disease, as I've said many times in the past. So when we, these are 2 of our new companies here. Scientific Sounds might be familiar with. That's where I have all my soundtracks, and we sell soundtracks there, generic soundtracks, and sound tables and sound chairs. Sky Collective is the new company that manages the collective of people that we've trained, and they're spread all over the world, and that has its own website. And then there's Sky Lounge, which we've opened up. So we moved everything out of my treatment rooms, my clinical practice space. We moved all that equipment out, and we redesigned that space completely. It costs us a lot of money and a lot of time to put it together, and that's called Sky Lounge. So it's the core and the basis of my sound work, called biotuning, in a publicly accessible place to deliver that sound healing technology without me there doing my holistic work as a personal physician. So my practice, the core of it was biotuning, finding a frequency that balances your nervous system and exposing you to that over time in a series of brain entrainment soundtracks. And then in addition to that, I would do what I had been doing for 40 years as a clinical practitioner. Chiropractic work, cranial sacral work, meridian balancing, biomagnetic therapy, Tesla high frequency currents, a whole bunch of stuff that I was throwing together to help and push that forward. And now that era is over. And the sound work itself is the core of the system and what's really doing the work. The rest was just to help you to heal faster if I could. But the core of the work is the sound work. And that's what Sky Lounge is all about. It sort of, instead of, relax the back, it's relax the mind. It's a mind spa for getting you balanced at the core and allowing the internal physician program to take over and start doing its job, because it's been blocked from doing that job, which is why you're sick. And so in contemplating returning to doing these live streams, I've missed the live streams. There's a connection that I have with all of you that I know that we all share. There's a distant intimacy in our group that is hard to explain. It's all just electronic signals bouncing off satellites. Me here, you there. But consciousness itself shines through time and space. So it makes no difference. We are making a direct contact, consciousness to consciousness. And in trying to contemplate what would these broadcasts look like? Would they be different? Would they be similar? Would they be exactly the same? And I really, it's a formula that has worked, and it worked well. So I didn't want to change it too much. Although now I am immersed in doing a lot of work. I do a lot of interviews. We are now going to different conferences. I'm creating new content, soundtracks. We're reinventing the biotuning system. Our programmer has completely rewritten the code for that system so that it can eventually be in the cloud, so that we'll have a global system in the cloud. There's a lot of advanced stuff going on here, and it's taking a lot of my time. So clearing a space for me to do this again has been exciting, and it also means that I can't do it exactly the way I did it before. So one change is that I will not be spending the extra day to make a new specific soundtrack that we all listen to at the end of this broadcast. I'm going to use all those 101 soundtracks that I made previously, and we'll reuse those. There are many people who follow these broadcasts, and they don't follow them live. They don't have time, or they're in a different time zone where this is 3 o'clock in the morning or something like that. They watch them later. Meantime, there are many people who have watched the previous live streams in the year and a half that I haven't been broadcasting. And at the end of the broadcast, I'm saying, go to this website. It'll be open for 1 week. You can download that soundtrack for free. And then they don't get it for free. It's only the people that were here that get that. You can always go back and look at the YouTube video, and at the end, scroll to the end and listen to the soundtrack. But there's no new soundtracks that I'm going to be making for each of these broadcasts. The ones that I've got are just fine. They do the job, and the job is what we're trying to do. So in thinking about how I would structure this and what this meant in a more cosmic sense, the obvious hexagram that governs that would be, the hexagram for return. So those of you who have the magic book, the Wilhelm Baines edition of the I Ching, the only one to buy, it's the I Ching Wilhelm Baines edition. It's hardbound. It's got commentaries by Confucius himself and the introduction written by Carl Jung. It's a heavy tome in more sense than one. And the concept of return exactly exemplifies this return that we're all making right now, back together again. In the realm of the I Ching, I did a whole live stream on the I Ching and its relationship to the 64 codons of DNA. There are 64 hexagrams, and a hexagram has got 6 lines. Hexa is 6, formed of 2 trigrams, tri meaning 3. So this right here is a trigram for Earth, and this here is a trigram for thunder. There are 8 trigrams that represent the 8 primal forces of nature. And when you stack those trigrams together, you get 64 mathematical possibilities, 64 hexagrams. So, because, remember, this is Chinese, and the Chinese language is a pictorial diagram, image, right brain oriented language. So that culture is very well versed in looking at symbols like this and seeing patterns within them. So the image of this one is thunder in the mountain, thunder under the earth, right? So this is on top, that's underneath. Thunder is under the earth, inside the earth. The other thing about hexagrams is that each of the 64 hexagrams, the solid line is the masculine line, the light line, and the broken line is the feminine line. So in the yin-yang signal, you've got the white and the black, 2 things sort of weaving together in a yin-yang symbol, male and female at the moment of orgasm, giving birth to the whole universe. And in these symbols of the 64 hexagrams, the light line enters at the bottom like a seed in the ground, and it works its way through the 6 stages to the top. And so this image of thunder under the earth has a whole explanation that takes place in the I Ching if we look it up. So when we look up in the book here, let's see if you can even see that. because the light is so bright. Yeah. That is the hexagram for return, called the turning point. And we're going to see what it has to say, because I Ching is always dead on the money when it explains what this return together actually sort of means. Return, the turning point. Kun, the symbol receptive, earth above, and Chen, the arousing thunder below. The idea of a turning point arises from the fact that after the dark lines have pushed all of the light lines upwards, dark lines are the broken lines and solid lines are the light lines. So after the dark lines have pushed all the light lines upward and out of the top of the hexagram, another light line enters the hexagram from below. This hexagram is linked with the 11th month, the month of the solstice, December, January. The winter solstice brings the victory of light returning. The time of darkness is past. And then there's a section called the judgment. Return, success, going out and coming in without error. Friends come without blame. To and fro goes the way. On the 7th day, 7 is an octave, has to do with sound. On the 7th day comes return. It furthers one to have somewhere to go. And then to explain the esoteric, judgment that we just read. After a time of decay comes the turning point. The powerful light that has been banished returns. There is movement, but it is not brought about by force. The upper trigram, Kun, is characterized by devotion. Thus, the movement is natural, arising spontaneously. For this reason, the transformation of the old becomes easy. The old is discarded, and the new is introduced. Both measures accord with the time. Therefore, no harm results. Societies of people sharing the same views, that's us, are formed. But since these groups come together in full public knowledge and are in harmony with the time, all selfish separatist tendencies are excluded, and no mistake is made. The idea of return is based on the course of nature. The movement is cyclic, and the course completes itself. Therefore, it is not necessary to hasten anything artificially. Everything comes of itself at the appointed time. This is the meaning of heaven and earth. All movements are accomplished in 6 stages. The 7th brings return. Thus, the winter solstice, with which the decline of the year begins, comes in the 7th month after the summer solstice. So too, sunrise comes in the 7th double hour after sunset. Therefore, 7 is the number of the young light, and it arises when 6, the number of the great darkness, is increased by 1. In this way, the state of rest gives place to movement. Now they have a little section on the image of those 6 lines. Thunder within the earth, the image of the turning point. Thus the kings of antiquity closed the passes at the time of solstice. Merchants and strangers did not go about, and the ruler did not travel through the provinces. And the explanation for that. The winter solstice has always been celebrated in China as the resting time of the year, a custom that survives in the time of rest observed at the new year. In winter, the life energy symbolized by thunder, the arousing, is still underground. Movement is just at its beginning. Therefore, it must be strengthened by rest, so that it will not be dissipated by being used prematurely. This principle, that is, of allowing energy that is renewing itself to be reinforced by rest, applies to all similar situations. The return of health after illness, the return of understanding after an estrangement, everything must be treated tenderly and with care at the beginning, so that the return may lead to flowering. Always dead on. Always dead on point. It's amazing, really. I Ching has always been my friend. When we look deeper at this hexagram, where it's talking about, you can see this is the hexagram right here of return, and we can see that the light line is entering at the bottom, and it begins to move its way upwards, and the light takes over until the last little bit of darkness is departing away. Then we have heaven, all strong lines. And then the dark line comes in at the bottom, and it starts to move upwards and take over until the last light line leaves at the top. This is the reverse of this one. And then that one disappears, and we have earth, the two grand forces of nature, heaven, earth, masculine, female, these two. So with the present hexagram, we can see that thunder is the lower trigram and earth is the upper trigram. That's the image. When we open Sky Lounge, another thing that has been happening is that a whole interesting family of people has been showing up in the last year and a half. And the level of these people has been increasing and increasing. It's really become a mind blower. We now have 4 people working in our team. There's me, and there's Shay, who runs the whole show business-wise, and then there's Austin Hallett, who moved here, who used to live here and then moved to Texas and moved back from Texas to be here with us and start helping us out. Austin, we have known since he was a little boy, because he used to play here with Shay when they were little kids. So he would be sort of a friend brother. Shay's half-brother has moved down from Washington State to be here. He's been an actor, and he's also been a top-level sort of salesman in a number of different types of venues. This last one was real estate. He's here to head up the sales team. Austin went to college in Boston at BU Film School, and so he's our top person with anything that has to do with film and images. We're ramping up our whole operation to be more and more and more polished and professional. Austin is running the show with these live streams with me. He's in the background. I will be fielding a few questions at the very end of this broadcast. Austin is curating that, and he will send me a few. I'll have about 20 minutes at the end to answer a few questions. So leave those questions in the chat. We also have Super Chat. If any of you feel inspired to donate to help us do what we're doing, $1 or $1 million, all help. if you go to the website, you should check out all these websites. This is Sky Lounge, the Sky Lounge website. You know, our philosophy is handling stress properly is at the center of all wellness, which means you should take care of it just like anything else. At Sky Lounge, we understand the importance that stress plays on the nervous system and its role in overall well-being. We use state-of-the-art technology to help ease your tension. Learn more about our technicians and how we can help you. This is what the main room looks like with the sound chair. This is the front space. This is Austin. This is Ryan. Ryan, Austin, Shay. We also have a one other person. That's Jake. He was also a little boy, ran around the house. One of the crazy ensemble of Shay and his friends. And it's remarkable that these friends are coming back. He's also going to be in sales. But we really have an interesting family that is just showing up. I was visited a few months ago by 3 psychiatrists who are doing ketamine therapy. It's one realm that I've been excited to get to be part of is chemical psychedelic therapy along with biotuning together to pull out all the stops of getting to the core of your consciousness in the most dramatic way you can. Our other website is Sky Collective. This is where we train practitioners, where they become part of this collective, embark on a global journey with the collective. You should go to these websites. They're all animated. They're cool. Joining the collective transcends beyond just the Lambda system, which is our new name for the biotuning software and biotuning. It's like gaining a global family. Our Lambda network boasts members from the United States to Australia, the EU, South Asia, Canada, South America, and more. And by the way, here this is what we're calling the hardware and software system that results in biotuning. And we've also had a major research project done with biotuning that was published and presented at the American Holistic, the American Psychotherapy Association convention. The results were profound, so profound that the college chair brought it before the National Psychotherapy Association, and they agreed to present that at the next national conference, which is what they did. Now it's published in the American Journal of Biomedical Science and Research, and you can find this article and read it on the Sky Collective website. You have to scroll down to the point where it says backed by science, and there's a little button that says read the research. If you can't find it, let us know. This is my new album that is coming out soon. As I said, I've got a number of albums in the pipeline, 6 that I've created at this point, with more on the way. We're pulling a whole bunch of these sound projects off the shelf and fleshing all of it out. I'll talk about that big view in a little bit. But this one is the flow state, and the flow state is a borderline state between alpha and theta. And in the past I've talked about borderline states, but the concept of borderline states and in training there is one of our discoveries at the Center for Neuroacoustic Research. So we have quite a laundry list of things that we've discovered, and we recognize 21 different brain states where the EEG community is still stuck with the original 4, beta, alpha, theta, delta. Only 50% of them recognize gamma, which was discovered in the late 80s, and nobody is recognizing epsilon, which I discovered in 1989, below delta brain activities. And nobody is recognizing the default mode network, which is the slowest brainwave frequency ever discovered, the 4 zones that are tightly synchronized that forms 95% of all brain function. And nobody recognizes these borderline states except for us. And we're the only ones who've been researching it, along with a whole bunch of other things that we can discuss. This is coming out, the release date is on Wednesday, November 8th, that's next week. You can get it at the scientificsounds.com website. So on Wednesday, when you go to that website, the very first thing you'll see is this on the banner. Also, for those watching this live stream, the Theta Meditation System soundtrack, we're giving a discount if you want to buy that. The discount code is return20, and that's also available through the Scientific Sounds website. So this concept of the flow state that most of us have heard of, it's well recognized now in EEG circles that the flow state is associated with a borderline state between alpha and theta. First, the flow state is located at the crossover point between alpha and theta brainwaves, somewhere around between 7 and 8 hertz. As brain activity slows from the relaxing alpha state into the more hypnagogic theta state, the neural network becomes highly attuned in this sort of flow state, peak performance flow state. So alpha over here, theta over here. When one changes to the other, there's a zone. And this concept of a borderline between two brain frequencies that is a state of its own, that is its own brain state, is a concept that only we have developed here at Center for Neuroacoustic Research. And we've had that in place now for 30 years. The first borderline state that I became aware of was research articles pointing out that memory and learning was most enhanced at the borderline between theta and delta. So that each one of these brain states has a range, and those ranges are based on bell curve studies of large groups of people. So when you talk about beta, alpha, theta, delta, and the range of beta, and the range of alpha, and the range of theta, those ranges are sort of amorphous, and they only apply to 80% of the people on a bell curve because it's not a hard and a fast rule. 20% of the people don't fit within the normal range of beta, alpha, theta, delta that you're familiar with. It could be anywhere, it could be way off. But essentially, beta is now recognized as 13 hertz up to about 38 hertz. Before the discovery of gamma, beta was considered 13 to 30. But then they discovered 40 hertz gamma in open brain surgery in the late 80s. And 50% of the EEG people added that as a new brain frequency and extended the range of beta from 30 up to 38. So now gamma is said to be somewhere between 35, 38, up to about 90. Because at the same time that they discovered gamma at 40 hertz, they also discovered 100 hertz brain activity and 200 hertz brain activity. And then there hasn't been a research article about either of those ever since the late 80s. We are the only people doing any research with 100 and 200 brain activity frequencies in our phase 3 of biotuning, which is high-tech meditation. We named them hypergamma and lambda, lambda being 200 hertz, the highest frequency ever measured of brain waves. So if we look at our chart here of the frequencies that we recognize, and this isn't actually the whole list, but we can see lambda way up here at 200 hertz, hypergamma at 100, gamma centered around 40. I should revamp this and put the ranges in here, because gamma is now recognized at 35 to 90. And hypergamma is 80 to about 190. They overlap a bit. Beta tends to have 3 categories: low beta, mid beta, and high beta. And so I don't have mid beta here. And then there's another specific brain frequency that's unique in beta called SMR beta, sensory motor region of beta, that is involved in a deficiency of SMR beta is ADD, ADHD, dyslexia, autism, things like that. Its sensory motor information needs to be synchronized for the brain to work properly. But here's our first borderline state, which would be where beta turns into alpha at 13 hertz or so. I didn't really solidify the idea. Down here is where memory and learning takes place. This is where the door to the deep unconscious memory storehouse opens up, and you can dump information directly into the unconscious mind without having to memorize it. And I used this for years with professionals studying for board and bar exams in California, who are in a state of freak out because if you don't pass the board or the bar exam, then you don't practice and you don't have a job for 6 months until the test comes around again. So I made this one for me to study for the chiropractic board exams when I first moved here from Virginia. And I made 96s, 98s on those tests. But there was an article that came out at one point. These in my news feeds, I have all these news feeds that come through anatomy, physiology, neurology, holistic health, quantum physics, all that kind of stuff. I keep my finger on the pulse. And there was an article about a long-term study done with prodigy children who have extreme high IQs, graduating from Harvard when you're 12, kind of a thing. And they wanted to kind of see, is there a common factor in their brain activity that might explain something? And what they did notice is preponderance of high-level brainwave activity at the borderline between beta and alpha, deeply associated with high IQ. We already know, about brain plasticity, that you can exercise your brain to be more efficient in the tasks that you ask it to do. And you do those over and over and over, it gets better and better at doing those tasks. So that's the beauty of brain entrainment. If we can find a brainwave frequency in research over here on EEG that is an enviable brain state to be able to do creativity or, in this case, IQ, that if we could entrain you to the borderline between beta and alpha, there's no reason to believe that we couldn't increase IQ, which is basically increasing brain capacity to make more and more calculations per second more efficiently. Beta is externally directed focused attention with high brain waves, and alpha is internally directed non-focused attention, more holographic mind, peripheral vision mind. And when one transits to the other, you can either focus on a task or you can focus on the periphery, but you can't do both at the same time. Your brain doesn't have enough processing power to process both sets of information. But if you have a high IQ, you do have enough brain processing power to do that. And so by entraining to that on a regular basis, we're taking your brain to an IQ gym, so to speak. And here is where we are right now with the flow state. This borderline between alpha and theta is somewhere between 7 and 8 hertz. And the reason I say that is because each of the ranges is a little bit different depending on which textbook you read. So some textbooks say that the alpha range is between 13 down to 7, and 50% of the other ones say it's 13 to 8. So split the difference and make it 7.5. That's tend to be what I do. And that's essentially what I did with this soundtrack. 7.5 hertz. Split the difference dead center in the middle of the transition zone between alpha and theta. So there's other interesting things that go on here. Because this one is the most in question in the literature about what its midpoint is, where one changes to the other, alpha to theta, that it's somewhere between 7 and 8. That's precisely where research has shown the flow state arises. The flow state arises in this transition zone, this borderline area that becomes a new area all of its own, a new country with a name, right? A borderline state, that's the flow state. Or I go into a special state of focus on everything. It's Tiger Woods, just me and the ball. It's a Zen-like state of total concentration and aware of the periphery at the same time. So it's me and the ball and the hole down the fairway. The whole world collapses away, and this is what my universe consists of. But it's not just, golf. It's my job. It's me in contact with my creativity. It's writer's block. It's composer block. It's how I push through that by going into a certain state where it all just flows and happens by itself. I'm in this effortless zone that is a good place to be. And also, it also happens to be where the Schumann resonance arises, 7.83 hertz. Alpha is mental activity, theta is emotional activity. It's where emotional intelligence is developed. So this zone right here. And each one of them has got something. Theta delta, delta epsilon, physical, metaphysical, theta delta, the access to long-term memory. There is beta gamma, which I don't have in here. I should put it in here. There are new indications that that different brainwave frequencies work together who are not in a borderline to each other. The concept of gamma and theta, that gamma brain activity, which is the binding frequency that pulls information from various areas of the cortex and binds it all together in one place so my world makes sense. it gamma modulates theta brain activity and lifts all that information right out of the brain into a brain cloud, internet connectivity, wireless connectivity in the brain by modulating theta with gamma waves. And now there's indications there's at least 2 other examples of brainwave frequencies combining together that are not borderlines to each other. So that brings us into a new area of research to begin to explore those. There's potentially thousands of different brain frequency interaction zones that spin from that idea. That led, at one point when I first learned that beta, alpha, theta, delta is all there is, and they told us don't look anyplace else because it's not there. And I discovered epsilon below delta brain activity on EEG, where I worked for 2 years with patients with EEG machines. And that was associated with explicit metaphysical experiences out of the body, precognitive epiphanies, things like that. I began to think, well, wait a second. They told us there was no basement in this house. I just discovered a basement. I wonder if there's a sub-basement. That became epsilon 2. You got to remember that delta at 1 hertz is 1 brain pulse every second. Delta at its lowest at 0.5 is 1 brain pulse every 2 seconds. So epsilon here would be 1 brain pulse every 2 seconds to every 4 seconds. And epsilon 2 would be 1 brain pulse every 4 seconds to every 8 seconds. And just what I was wondering, if there's a sub-basement below here, they discovered default mode network in 2001, which is 1 brain pulse every 10 seconds to every 20 seconds. So DMN1 would be every 10 to 20 seconds, would be every 10 seconds to every 20 seconds, and a proposed experimental brain frequency that we've got down here would be iota 1 at 1 pulse every 20 seconds to every 40 seconds, and every 40 seconds to every 80 seconds. Those brain frequencies are so unimaginably slow that now we are aligning with planetary respiratory cycles of plants and the Earth itself. That's this new research application of brain frequencies that logic tells us that there may be no end to the sub-basements and no end to the attics on top of attics. They told us there was no attic in this house above beta. Then they discovered gamma, so there's an attic. And at the same time, they discovered 100 hertz and 200 hertz, an attic above an attic, another attic above an attic. And who's to say that the attics don't go forever and the basements don't go forever? Logic would tell us that all the indications that we see is there's no reason to believe that there's some wall that you come up against and everything stops. It's just deeper and deeper and deeper rhythmic alignments with deeper substrates of quantum reality that we might experience. The fact that we can't measure them, we don't have equipment yet to measure brain frequencies, at 1 pulse every 80 seconds or frequencies above 200 hertz. It doesn't mean that they're not there. So in the experimental research area of what we're up to, we explore these as deep contact with the collective unconscious mind, perhaps of the planet, where we have 1 pulse every 20 seconds to every 40 seconds with iota 1. And it turns out that I was right after all, because I've been doing this experimental work now for almost 30 years, exploring iota 1 and 2. And now there is an article has just come out. Have you ever wondered if Earth has a heartbeat? Well, it turns out that our planet does pulsate every 26 seconds, and scientists have no idea why. This mysterious phenomenon has been detected by seismometers across the world for more than half a century, but its origin and meaning remains unknown. One pulse every 26 seconds, that is iota. That falls within this range. It took them 30 years to find out what I've been screwing around with for 30 years, but groundbreaking discovery. Earth emits a pulse every 26 seconds and no one exactly knows why. But we have soundtracks that can entrain your brainwaves to that. So you can find out why from the inside, where all answers are answered, right? Get in contact with your deep and ancient self who knows, because it participated in designing the entire system. And then there's the Schumann resonance, which is said to be, a brainwave frequency in the borderline between alpha and theta, between 7 to 8 hertz. So if this is the heartbeat, then this is the brainwaves. And my next album will be this. After the flow, it will be Schumann resonance. The ionosphere of the Earth, charged electromagnetic particles as ions, trap electromagnetic discharges from lightning activity around the Earth. At any given second, there are 50,000 lightning storms going on across the Earth somewhere. And all that electrical discharge gets trapped between the Earth's surface and the inner surface of the ionosphere like a mirror, and it bounces around. And now it's just an equation. How fast does an electromagnetic frequency travel? How fast does it travel? What's the difference, the distance between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere? And we can work out what the frequency is of the bounce, 7.83 hertz. Now, the beauty is that there's harmonics. 7.83 hertz is fundamental, but it spins harmonics and overtones out of that. So now each of these frequencies has special significance as well. More cool and interesting stuff to explore as far as aligning with the Earth as a whole with brain entrainment. And then there's this whole thing of entraining people together, like why we're here. The real ultimate purpose of why we're here is to align ourselves together in a very core way in our consciousness, aligned with science, using binaural beats that synchronize the hemispheres, so I'm in touch with the aha part of me, the part where new original ideas can drop into my localized brain from the universe as a whole. Where we work together to weave together a new tapestry of the universe itself, a new experience of reality that can pop out of the existence of us aligning to the same thought of what we would like to see the universe be, what we'd like to see our world, our experience be in the world. And of course, Scientific American, this just came out July 1st, 2023, brainwaves synchronize when people interact. The minds of social species are strikingly resonant. Well, excuse me, but that's actually an old idea that's been around for a long time. People have been aligning their brains in meditation since the ancient times in order to change reality. I had a whole discussion about Lindisfarne 1, 2, and 3. Yeah, that would have been in probably the first 3 broadcasts I ever put out. You might want to go back and revisit that. The explanation about why bringing people together causes quantum shifts. So essentially, it's the coupled oscillator phenomenon. You get 2 people within 6 feet of each other, the heart waves start to mingle. You get closer than that, and your brain waves start to mingle. If you touch foreheads with another person, your brain waves would really start to synchronize up. And this concept in the Scientific American article is, what is brain synchrony, right? Is the synchronizing of brain waves when people interact together. So you can have strangers in a room and they will start to interact slowly, but if they start to interact consciously with each other, it really starts to align from a non-aligned state to a really heavy aligned state. A global mind. That's what we're trying to pull off here. Global mind interaction, where we start to function as one big subterranean networked mind that can police its expectation of what the world could be. And with that, we got the soundtrack to do that. Headphones, please. And here we go. Hello, welcome back. So Austin has been managing in the background, looking through the comments, and has popped up a few of the questions that were asked in those comments. I'm going to check those out right now here. And so I'll be here for an additional 20 minutes or so, seeing if I can answer a few of these questions, so you can, if you have to go someplace, then this will be part of the recording that you can watch if you wish, or you can stay. Diane Schwartz says, I recently saw Ian Bruce, who is one of our long-term biotuning practitioners. Saw him in Long Beach and have been listening to the Delta 1 tape. I relax when listening to the tape and fall asleep at times, though when the tape stops, I wake up. Any suggestions? So in the clinical practice or in Sky Lounge, when a person comes and they get their measurement by hooking up this patented real-time heart rate variability system, so we can see the sympathetic parasympathetic nervous system live on a computer screen, and we can do sound explorations to find out what sound exactly balances your nervous system into zero stress state, and then we make all these calculations from that of lower octaves that all work. And the lowest octaves are brain frequencies, beta, alpha, theta, delta, but they're very specific clinical brain frequencies that cause homeostasis in the nervous system. So we've got a whole new use of brain entrainment and binaural beats and synchronicity than anybody else in the world is using brain entrainment for. We're using it for a highly specific clinical application for individuals that are highly tuned to it. And so each of these brain states, say for instance alpha and theta and delta, we made discoveries that based on acoustic physics, every octave of the correct note for the wine glass, every octave is going to make the wine glass vibrate. That's octave resonance. Every harmonic of that tone will make the wine glass vibrate. That's harmonic resonance. And everything in the universe is set up the same way, including your body. So if I find a frequency that balances the autonomic nervous system in the center of my brain and puts me into heal mode, internal position, in place, balance and zero stress, then I know from the law of octaves that if I take that frequency and divide it in half, that's one octave, and in half, and in half, and in half, and in half, all those octaves. If I played one of those octaves all by itself, that would also make this happen. Calculated octaves below the lowest range of hearing at 20 hertz are now brain frequencies. Beta, alpha, theta, delta, epsilon, gamma, and all the rest. But these are brain frequencies. They're highly specific for your brain because when they represent a key to a neural program that makes homeostasis on my computer screen, because they're octaves of this fundamental tone that does that, and all octaves work. So that means that it gives us a glimpse and an insight into what sleep really means. That sleep is rest and recuperation and rebuilding. More is being discovered all the time. At a certain stage of sleep, cerebral spinal fluid washes over the brain in a very special application. The brain is bathed, taking a bath with electrolytic solution that charges up the whole nervous system. Neurons generate electrical impulses, but they do it way, way, way better if they're floating in a vat of electrolytic solution, which is what cerebral spinal fluid is, and why the cranial pump is pumping it around so there's fresh fluid all the time. But at a certain stage of sleep, production and pumping of cerebral spinal fluid accelerates so that the brain is literally washed with cerebral spinal fluid and flushes out debris, physical debris and junk and dead cells, and it's flushing the brain, and it's also charging it up at the same time with electrolytes. But it also means when we do the calculations of anybody who comes in and we calculate those octaves, we find out that alpha has 1 octave, theta has 1 octave, but delta has 3 separate octaves just from the math before you hit 0.5 hertz, the lowest range of delta. So now we just discovered something, that the delta portion of sleep has 3 separate levels of physical recuperation. And we know that delta is associated with physical recuperation because in delta sleep is when you're most profoundly out cold asleep. You're not dreaming, you're not aware in any way, your body is completely quiescent, not moving because you are out cold, and you have lowest respiration, lowest heart rate, lowest blood pressure, lowest pulse, and lowest body temperature at that point, when the physical body, even at a cell level, is reaching its most quiescent, deepest relaxed state. That's physical healing. So if I put you on this sound chair after I've found this magic frequency and I calculate the octaves into the lowest level of delta that we identify, we call it delta 1, where the deepest level of physical recuperation takes place. And we pick the lock of that neural program and make it run with brain entrainment. We entrain your brainwaves to delta 1, and it picks the lock of that program, and it makes it run like it does at night. Which really means that sleep is, as I'm traveling and my brainwaves are slowing down in alphas, getting deeper and deeper into less awake and more asleep, the deeper in alpha I go, there's a key frequency in there that when we hit that frequency, the brain recognizes that as the combination lock that unlocks the homeostasis program and does healing, specific healing program for the brain, for the mind, the mental functioning in alpha. And then the brain waves come out of that and slow down, cross over the borderline into theta, and dreaming begins. And my brainwaves slow down and hit another key frequency in theta that unlocks the program that makes homeostasis take place, and that's where the healing takes place in theta, in emotions, because dreams are emotional, right? You're being chased by the boogeyman and you think it's real. So that's where emotions get healed at night, in dreaming, sleep, and what picks the lock of that program and makes it run is this highly specific brain frequency that we've identified as an octave of the frequency that balances the autonomic nervous system. Similarly in delta, now the brain is slowing down in delta, it hits 1 frequency and picks the lock and starts to heal. Then it slows down, hits the 2nd frequency, picks the locks and does some healing. And then it goes down to the deepest part, finds another frequency, picks the lock, and makes that heal. So delta 1 is the deepest, the most vegetative function. It has to do with recalibrating my respiratory centers, my heart centers and pulse, the electrical activity of my heart, how my heart and my lungs work together, because it's slowest respiration, slowest heart rate. It's also got to do with the deep vegetative functions in the brainstem that control body temperature, because my body temperature goes down to the lowest. It's lowest cellular metabolic processes, so it means my cells are being worked on, that the ATP generating, energy generating thing like the mitochondria is being worked on, that the organelles inside the cell are being recalibrated, that DNA is being repaired, and the deep functions. The interesting thing, though, is that when a person comes out of a 30-minute session of listening to the soundtrack with the entrainment, many people think that they went to sleep. And actually, that's not what's happening at all. The confusion arises from the standpoint that all the experiences in your life, the only way you've ever been able to get to that deep level of delta and turn that program on is to go through the entire sleep process of alpha, then theta, then delta 3, and then 2, and then 1. In order to get there, you had to go to sleep and enter into that process to get to that low point to turn on the program. But with brain entrainment, we can entrain your brain waves directly and turn that program on without going through the whole sleep process to get there. And this is new experience. Your brain is not used to it. When your brain experiences that deep level of healing, it assumes, because all of its experiences support that, that I must have gone through the whole sleep process to get here, so I must have fallen asleep. Not so. You did not fall asleep. We picked the lock of a program and made it run, which you only usually can get to in sleep, but this is different now, so you're confused. You did not go to sleep. We commandeered your brain function to pick the lock of a healing program in deep delta, and we made that run for 30 minutes, and you thought you were asleep, but you weren't. Because when you come out of it, quote, wake up, you're not groggy like you would be if you had been asleep in deep delta. You feel aware. You feel centered. You feel like you're humming. You feel like you're revitalized. You don't feel groggy at all like you've been asleep. So that's the interesting thing about that. Each one of those brain states that we do entrainment to and pick the lock and make that program run might be in theta, where dreaming takes place, but you weren't in a dream. You weren't asleep. You were in your deep unconscious mind, and the language of the unconscious mind is dreamlike imagery. It's allegorical, metaphorical, surreal imagery is the language of the unconscious mind. And when we pick the lock and we put you there, you're in that zone speaking to your unconscious mind. It's speaking to you in its language. And things are getting done. You may mistakenly think that you had to get to sleep to go there, but that's not what we're doing here. That's not what's happening. It's a very interesting new phenomenon, new experience. But don't be fooled. You are going to sleep. However, Delta Sleep, the Delta 1 soundtrack takes you to the deepest place in deep sleep. And if you put that soundtrack on at night to help you go to sleep, because it does with a lot of people, they swear by the Delta 1 soundtrack. When that slowly fades out and fades out and fades out, you could continue with the sleep process, and it's aided by the fact that you are in bed with covers on, with the lights out. So that's a Pavlov dog kind of a thing. It's a learned neurological response. Everything in your environment and experience at that moment is telling you, oh, we're doing the sleep thing now, right? I'm in bed, the covers are on, the lights are off. It's like I've been down in this deep zone where I'm completely out, and then that slowly fades out, and I just continue by momentum into my actual true sleep process. Maureen O'Brien. Dr. Thompson, I have been listening to you since you started. Blessings to you. Now your brain is truly fried. Well done. You have come a long way. How does a group of people listening to headphones get linked when they are listening to the same thing at the same time? And this is a phenomenon that has been well researched. Most of that research has been in person, so it's easiest to understand there. There's this phenomenon called the science of coupled oscillators. Coupled oscillators is the universal law that governs all things in the universe. Everything is trying to dance together to save energy. So we have rhythms in nature, rhythms in the universe. Natural systems tend to time themselves to these earth rhythms. Birds fly in flocks and swim, and fish swim in schools, and brainwaves fire in synchrony with each other in sweeps of depolarization across the cortex at different speeds. That's why they're called brain waves. It's like a wave in a football game. People are standing up and sitting down, and it looks like a wave is sweeping across the crowd. There's no wave. It's brain waves fire in synchrony. Same thing happens if you and I are together physically and we're within 6 feet of each other. The electromagnetic field of my heart extends 6 feet out, so does yours, so they mingle. Once they mingle, they use each other to time their body clocks to, and your heart rate, respiration, and eventually brain waves will start to synchronize just being in proximity. It's accentuated if you're friends. It's more accentuated if you're lovers. If I touch you, if we are that close and we hold hands, now the whole thing accelerated and accentuated because of the skin conduction. Now we've got electromagnetic skin conduction. We just connected 2 nervous systems with a modem. And now this electromagnetic connection accelerates that whole process. So now if we extend that into a group meditation, which is essentially what we're kind of doing here, a group meditation where we have a circle of 20 people who are sitting in a circle. This is what I did with Mattel, by the way. I was hired by Mattel to boost creativity and problem solving with brain entrainment in a team building environment. So I already knew that if I can get all 20 people in this group to sit on the floor on a pillow with their legs crossed and take their shoes and socks off and scoot everybody in until their knees touch, now we have physical contact. We've got a modem, knee modem. However, when you're scooting close enough together that your knees touch, your feet, your legs are crossed and your feet are bare. The bottoms of your feet are touching the bottoms of the people's feet on either side of you. So now we've got a physical connection through electromagnetic conductivity of the skin, right? It's Dr. Thompson's mingling of the souls of your feet. Now we just accentuated the coupled oscillator connection through skin contact. The whole thing will accelerate. Then I would have everybody cross their arms over and hold hands, another electromagnetic connection. And we've now got a double braided electromagnetic connection to maximize the coupled oscillator, synchronizing everybody's nervous systems and brain waves and heart rate and respiration. The only thing that could bring that to another level would be to have everybody there listen to the same brainwave entrainment soundtrack. Because now it would accentuate that everybody's brainwaves are not just randomly going somewhere like a herd of cats, but everybody's brainwaves are being forced by science to go to precisely and exactly the same exact brain state. And now we have a group mind link. We have the possibility of everybody's brainwaves are resonating precisely controlled together into the same brain state. We really have the possibility of another level of under the hood connection with each other that is confounding to the rational thinking mind to explain. Now we can hook every single person up there to heart monitors and pulse monitors, and and EEG machines, and we can watch this process happen. We can watch heart rate and respiration and pulse rate and brain waves all synchronize up together. That would be a valuable research project to do. Project number 2315 on my shelf, where I've got time to do, money to do 1 and time to do maybe 3. That's why we constantly need research funding. So send your $1 million in today. And so when we do it in this format through the internet, where we don't have physical bodies anymore, And our only connection now is the fact that we're resonating to the same ideas, that I'm putting forth ideas and understandings that is not new information for anybody who's in this crowd. There might be a research article you weren't familiar with, but the basic concept of the esoterica of how life works and the esoteric nature of reality and quantum physics and ancient texts and modern technologies, this is, I would think, most everybody that's here understands at least the basic concepts, may not understand the ultimate details that I put forth that solidifies it for you. But we're already on the same page. I am just aligning that page to a whole nother level by entraining everybody's brainwaves with headphones that cause synchronicity. Synchronicity creates the open door to the universe, my aha factor. It opens me to new original ideas dropping in from somewhere. That if any of you are creative in any way, and you're a musician or an artist or a writer or anybody who does a creative exercise, you know what that feels like when you struggle, and all of a sudden the door opens and the whole thing drops in, full blown, blueprints and everything. You know it's bigger than you, and you know that the magic of it only happens when you get out of your own way. That's very close to the flow state. You get out of your own way. You step out of your way. Your brain is not like worried about my performance anymore. It's step aside. And I can be one with my performance, which is always my best performance. We look for that. We want that. Brain entrainment can now train that. So if we're all listening to the same soundtracks, and the soundtracks have binaural beats, and we've all got headphones, and that's causing this, which opens the door for everybody, that aids in the process of us aligning. And if you know anything about quantum physics, you realize that is a complete illusion that I'm here and you're there. That's not so. That's part of the illusion that we're here trying to see through, to experience through, that we are collective consciousness. And we're trying to realign and awaken that, because there's power in numbers. There's power in aligning consciousness together to make deep level changes in reality itself. That's what we're up to as an experiment. We know it to be true on paper, but nobody except us is putting it to the test. That's what I'm doing here as an experiment in conscious alignment to make real change in the universe. It's a worthy experiment to do, and there's no downside. So that's what we're up to with that. Gabriel S. How is a flow state different from the existing brainwave suite program, the brainwave suite program set, which is 4 CDs in a set, when there were CDs? Track 4, the awakened mind. So the awakened mind is something very specific. There was a EEG researcher back in the 60s named C. Maxwell Cade. It's a British thing. They don't put their first name. They put the first initial with a period in their middle name. C. Maxwell Cade. What was the name? Charlie or something? But C. Maxwell Cade had the first portable EEG device that showed both hemispheres' activity on 15 levels of brain frequencies. And the screen was LED lights in lines with each brain frequency from beta down to delta. And by how many of those lights were lighting up, you could see the amplitude of different brain frequencies and what they were doing. And he was hooking up, traveling around the world, hooking up advanced meditators to see what does enlightenment look like, or what does problem solving look like, or what does a mathematician's brain look like when he's working on a problem, or a musician in the moment of revelry. What do these things look like? But in particular, what does enlightenment look like? And he saw one pattern show up on this EEG machine called the mind mirror. You could do a Google search, mind mirror, C. Maxwell Cade, and you'll see what I'm talking about. There was one pattern that showed up so often in enlightened meditators that he called it the awakened mind pattern. It was a certain pattern of amplitude relationships of different frequencies of alpha, beta, alpha, theta, and delta. So it formed this pattern that looked sort of like this. And the other thing that it showed was synchronicity of the hemispheres. It's always associated as a ground state in any form of advanced meditation experience. This is always there. So you could see the right-left hemisphere images were mirrored of each other with a little bit of beta, a large amount of alpha, and a little larger than that of theta, and then a bit of delta. So all of them are present in an overall pattern. So this concept that there's an alpha state or a theta state or a delta state is really not correct, because there's never a time when the brain just produces one brain frequency. They're all going on at the same time, except they are forming patterns of relationships of amplitude that, yes, you might be in an alpha state, but really you've got some beta activity and some theta activity and some delta activity also going on, but their amplitudes are so low. And they also have shapes. Some amplitudes in delta are higher than others, but the lion's share, the biggest by far amplitude, is like 10 hertz alpha. So you might say, oh, I'm in an alpha state, but no. What kind of alpha state? Is it 10 hertz? Is it 13 hertz? Is it 5? You know, what is it? When you understand more. So the awakened mind was a awakening moment for me, because that's when I recalibrated my brain into thinking, wow, that's right. Patterns of consciousness, patterns of brain waves is where it's at. Not entraining to some single thing. Although, when you entrain to the single thing, like for instance the flow state at 7.5, let's say, if I entrain you to 7.5, your brain recognizes that as the point where it links with its flow state. And the flow state for you would have its own mind mirror pattern that's unique, that where you've got beta and and alpha and theta and delta frequencies in a certain configuration, but the 7.5 is the maximized, where you go into the flow state. The rest would be subservient. And so if I only entrain you to 7.5 and you recognize that state and you fall into it, all the rest would assemble themselves, because that's what you do when you're in that state. So the awakened mind, I took that as a challenge, and I created the awakened mind pattern that C. Maxwell K had found, a certain pattern relationship of lower amplitudes beta, higher amplitudes alpha theta, and lower amplitudes delta. And I took each one of those 15 levels and I created it as binaural beats, 15 layers of binaural beats built into a soundtrack to listen with headphones to make this and the awakened mind pattern. Years later, I was requested by a big catalog that my stuff was going into, the Nightingale Conant catalog, requested that they wanted to see a music version of the awakened mind pattern, because the original one I did in Brainwave Suite was all 15 layers of 3D nature sounds with the binaural beats built into the nature sounds. So I composed the awakened mind system later for Nightingale Conant. And that soundtrack hit an all-time high in sales. It was number 10 in top sales in the United States for 4 months on the Billboard charts. Then it dropped down to 23 for the rest of the year. So it was a huge success, and I was really happy with the concept that people were excited about buying this enlightenment pattern soundtrack, that's what people's interest was. It gave me hope for humanity that was happening. Ginger Griffin, when working with children, how long and often would listen to flow frequency be beneficial? My work hasn't really been with the flow state with children. It's been mostly children with difficult learning impediments, or ADD and ADHD, as dyslexia, autism, epilepsy, those concussion, those kind of conditions. The children being brought in by distressed parents, that because nobody in the medical system seems to have any idea what they're doing, what to do with it. And I have a lot of expertise, and that was the big part of my practice, was children and neurological conditions. And I had good fixes for that, using, returning the system back to zero stress, and then in training deficient brain frequencies that are associated with those conditions. Children kind of live in the flow state. Children expend huge amounts of time in theta, daydream mode. They're manufacturing more when I was a child than sort of the distressing trends that I've seen in the last 20 years. Before, like I remember Shay, when he was 9, we were playing the first 3D computer game on a laptop. It was a primitive version of Tomb Raider. But it's the first game I ever experienced where you have an animated body that you can control and make her climb things and grab things and interact with things and climb caves and go in these incredible environments and discover Atlantis. And it was fascinating, mind-blowing. And at one point he said, "What were your favorite computer games when you were a kid, Dad?" And I had to whoa. Computers hadn't even been invented when I was a kid. And then I could see his mind went, oh my God, and there was some point in the prehistoric past when there was no computers, and my dad was there, and then it was the comeback was, well, what was your favorite videos? I didn't have videos when I was a kid. What was your favorite TV show? Well, they didn't have TV when I was a kid. Hadn't been invented yet. I remember the first TV that was bought in the neighborhood down the street, just in the early 50s. They had a block party, and everybody showed up with a potluck, sat around and watched the TV come on. The TV came on at 4 in the afternoon. First, it had a test pattern with an Indian head and a bunch of lines. And at midnight, it went off. Played the Star Spangled Banner with a bunch of waving flags and movies and shit going on. And then it would, at the end of the Star Spangled Banner, the picture would go off and there would be snow until 4 o'clock the next afternoon. So no, they didn't have televisions when I was a kid. And then he's going, well, what did you used to do? I'm thinking, now there's a good question. What did I used to do? Let's see. In the morning, my mom would shoo me out of the house after I had breakfast. Out, it's a nice day out. Go outside, don't stay inside. So I'd go outside and I'd play all day long. And I'd be a cowboy and an Indian. I'd strap on my little gun and put a hat on. But I was riding a horse, and I was out west with my buddies, and I was having fights with Indians, and whatever it was. It was all up here in my mind. It was exercising a theta creative function that is only possible when you have to use your imagination. That's why it's good to read books. It forces your imagination. It's using words to paint pictures in your emotions and manufacture imagery. That is a good thing to exercise. If you have creativity as part of your life, that's what you have to do. You have to use that muscle. Now, if you're playing a video game or you're on your phone all the time scrolling, you're passive and you don't have to use your imagination because it's spelled out in front of you. The movie is made. You just watch it. If you read the book, right? You watch Lord of the Rings, the movie. It's awesome. Read the book, blows your mind. There's levels of detail and levels of the story that they had to cut out for the movie that aren't in the movie. The level of detail and the level of what happens in here in your imagination, there's no way around that except perhaps brain entrainment to theta to work it artificially. So kids live there all the time. You don't really need to expand their flow until they start to lose it around age 7 or 8. What this is Abraham Gerald Meyer. What frequency would be the most appropriate frequency for schizophrenic patients? So there's been a certain amount of research with this. Schizophrenia represents the most severe disconnect between the right-left hemispheres that has been measured. Now, 80% of the fibers cross over to the opposite side. 20% go straight. The disconnect is so severe across the corpus callosum that schizophrenic patients have what's called a homolateral walk, where your arm, normally when you walk, your arm and opposite legs swing forward at the same time, and then the opposite one, the opposite arm and leg come forward, and then that's how you walk. A homolateral walk is the right arm and the right leg come forward at the same time, and the left arm and the left leg come forward at the same time. You can definitely see it with the run. If it doesn't show in the walk, it'll show in the run. Homolateral run. That's how disconnected these two are. Normally, I have the ability to synchronize all up what's going on in my brain, synchronize it up so it makes sense to me. But if that synchronicity starts to fall apart, then that little voice, my own voice that's talking in my head all the time, I have a dialogue with myself all the time, I know it's me because it's integrated. But if it wasn't integrated, if something was wrong with me, then I would experience that as a voice from somewhere talking to me. There's a voice in my head talking to me, and I don't know who it is or where it's coming from. And my normal way of using my imagination and running little memory movies as part of my memory. So if I ask you, what did you have for breakfast this morning? It's not linear. You run a movie in your brain of you making breakfast. You see a picture of you. You see a movie of you making breakfast or eating breakfast or something. That's a theta function. So a portion of my brain comes over, drops to theta, generates the movie, pulls it off the shelf. Oh, movie of breakfast on this morning. So show that little movie. Oh, I remember what I was eating because I can see the movie. In schizophrenia, those are hallucinations. It's not integrated. I don't realize this is a normal functioning in my brain to have these images generating, imaginations generating. It's on its own, untethered and out of control. So there is a lot of research in PubMed articles about schizophrenia being deeply associated with the default mode network, the most advanced stuff in neuroscience. These 4 zones that they discovered in 2001 with fMRI studies of a brain showed the slowest brain frequency ever discovered. 1 brain pulse every 10 seconds to every 20 seconds. In these 4 zones in the brain that are tightly synchronized with this super slow pulse. So the pulses are rising in all 4 zones in tight synchronicity with each other. And when I first saw that in my news feeds, then I'm swearing every week research articles were hitting publication about what does it mean. First of all, the 4 zones represent 95% of brain function. It's the default mode function of the brain. The default mode is these 4 zones synchronized together at a super slow brain pulse. 5% off the top is all rational thinking mind, dialogue, and activity. Everything that you think your whole life is filled with, being here in this personality with this name, doing what you do, having conversations, that's only 5%. 95% is under the hood in this default mode function. Question is, what the hell's going on down there? What are they doing down there? What's going on? And that's still under study, but the preliminary research reports that have been coming through and still come through is that it's called mind wandering, wool gathering. The brain is cut free of task-oriented activities. It's holographic exploration of multiple levels of stuff going on seemingly at random, but we know it's not at random because it's all very highly synchronized. It's got to do with consolidation of data, pruning of data and throwing it away, compartmentalizing information. At a deeper level, it's where the quantum computer of the big mind connects with the umbilical cord of the universal mind, the big mind, the collective mind, where God knows what processes are going on. And from a quantum standpoint, and from an ancient literature standpoint, like Upanishads and Sutras of Patanjali, 4,000-year-old texts, talk about this, that it could very well be the quantum reality generator that we talk about. That is, got 1 foot in the present moment and 1 foot in time and space. So further articles that came out showed what these 4 zones meant. And most of the gray matter that's involved in this front zone is down between the hemispheres. So if we get our little friend here, you know me, of course I've got a brain. So so here we've got the 2 hemispheres, and the 2 hemispheres come apart into the right-left hemispheres, right? And so that means that here, in all of this zone, these are also, you know, brain noodles, right? We've got brain noodles on the outside called gyri. The space between are called sulci. And so we've got brain noodles on the inside. So there's gray matter here doing thinking. We don't normally see that part because we don't pull the brain apart to look, but in the default mode network, there's a zone at the front, but most of the zone, there's a small area on the outside, but most of it is in here. Most of the brain activity of the frontal zone is in here. It's a huge area that covers the whole inside down between the hemispheres. And it's the same thing with the occipital lobe. So the front, the occipital goes down between the hemispheres. So most of the activity is inside between the 2 hemispheres with a little area on the outside. And then on the right-left areas, the temporoparietal zones here, it also goes down between the hemispheres. So the zone is here, but it actually goes in between. So it goes in between where there's gray matter on both these surfaces. So most of it is in between. Those 4 zones, we now know, excuse me, part of my brain dropped on the floor. Oh, it's the right cerebellum. Oh dear, I have to dust that off and wash it so you don't have dirty thoughts, right? So now we know that these 4 zones, the frontal zone down between the hemispheres, has to do with my sense of self on the inside of my skin. Who I am on the inside of my own skin is processed here, and back here at the occipital zone is who I am on the outside of my skin. Me versus the universe at large. And so when you synchronize these 2 zones together, I get my normal sense of here in space. me and the world, synchronized up together. These two is a sense of time. All my past memories up to the last instant, anticipating 1 instant, 1 minute, 1 hour for the rest of my life into the future. I synchronize those two zones together and I get my normal sense of the present moment, me being here now, in the present. So you can see that if any kind of desynchronizing starts to take place between these 4 zones, the first thing that comes to mind is dissociative disorders, psychiatric conditions. Research has confirmed dissociative conditions, schizophrenia is deeply associated with the desynchronizing of the 4 zones. Schizophrenia, as it goes through its own spectrum, because there's minor schizophrenia and major schizophrenia. It's like depending on where you are in that spectrum, you show more and more and more desynchronizing of communication between the right and left hemispheres, and more desynchronizing of the 4 zones. It turns out that desynchronizing of the 4 zones is associated with every single neurological disease that you have ever heard of. It's ADD and ADHD and dyslexia and autism and epilepsy and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and PTSD and clinical depression and more that I can't pop off the top of my head now, but every single one of those is associated with desynchronizing of the 4 zones. So it's super important to have them synchronized. And so that's part of our phase 1 healing program, is to resynchronize the 4 zones. So it would be part of the main treatment program with any of those neurological conditions. Now, in our research, I've also seen that I believe that gamma is heavily involved as well, particularly in autism, where it's not currently recognized. What's recognized in autism is mu brain activity, which has to do with socialization skills, and sensory motor cortex asynchronicities, SMR beta. Same thing with ADD and ADHD, SMR beta and gamma function. But I believe that schizophrenia, number 1, default mode network. Number 2, gamma. Number 3, you have to get the physical recuperation back in deep delta, because all these conditions that involve the brain function are the most worrying that it can possibly be for the autonomic nervous system. All of those conditions have the maximum stuck in sympathetic overdrive that you can have, because the brain is most worried about the brain having a problem, because it tells everybody else what to do. So that's a key element. Resynchronize sympathetic, parasympathetic, reestablish homeostasis, 0 stress zone, so that internal physician can start to work. And then align that with brain entrainment for key brain patterns that we know are associated with that through research. And then there's someone else here who looks like a Greek name. I can't read. The last name starts with a Z. I was thinking of purchasing one of those portable mini 7 chakra colored singing bowls. Are those any good? So unfortunately, I'm not sure of what the portable mini 7 chakra colored singing bowls are. I haven't seen that. But what I do know about Tibetan bowls and bowls in general, as a matter of fact, I know a lot about that. I've done heavy research on that. I've taken Tibetan bowls and recorded them with 3D microphones in my recording studio and done spectral analysis of them to find out what's going on. Hang on a second. Happen to have a few. I actually have Tibetan bowls all over my house. I've got them upstairs and downstairs and in the garage. So let's take this one for example. Now, as some of you know, I I went to art school in the 60s, four-year college, Massachusetts College of the Arts. I learned fine arts. Part of my journey in fine arts was sculpture, and all of my sculpture work was lost wax. In other words, making molds and pouring molten metal into these molds, brass, aluminum. Later, I started a business with pewter tableware, 18th century reproductions of pewter tableware. I became an expert in mold making. I became an expert metalsmith. So I became an expert in making my own alloys. So picking up one of these bowls, I know exactly what the content of this bowl is. I don't know exactly the percentages that are used, but this is a brass bowl because it's more gold than yellow. A yellowish one instead of goldish one would be brass bowl. This is a bronze bowl. Did I say brass before? No, this is a bronze bowl because it's more gold. Its major content is copper with a smaller percentage of tin. And like it would be 97% copper and maybe 2.5 tin, and the rest something like antimony or something. By adjusting that, you can change the tone of the bowl. By adding more tin or adding more copper, you can change its flexibility, its tensile strength, what it sounds like. So by changing that mix, you can change its timbre, how beautiful it sounds as a tone. You want a beautiful sound of a tone because just doing that automatically centers your mind and puts you into this kind of meditative state. It quiets the chatter just by making this little sound. However, how the bowl actually works to change consciousness, aside from that factor, is if you listen closely, there's a pulsing in this bowl. Wah, 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 wah. There's a pulsing. Every bowl has a pulsing. That pulsing is a brainwave speed. So just when I have surrounded myself, I'm in my recording studio right now. I've got $40,000, $50,000 worth of equipment, high-tech equipment, keyboards racked and stacked, and $30,000 grand piano. Just when I think I'm doing fancy work with binaural beats and brain entrainment and headphones and all this stuff that I can measure on EEG, I find out that Tibetans did it 3,000 years ago. That pulses a brainwave speed. This is a brainwave entrainment device to put you in a certain state of meditation. The tone of the bowl centers my mind, and the brain entrainment directs where I'm going to go with my consciousness. How did they know this 3,000 years ago, and how did they accomplish putting a pulsing in this bowl? If you look at the fact that the bowl has a curve, this curve means that the diameter down here is different than the diameter right here. Two different tones interacting together is actually a binaural beat. Binaural meaning two tones interacting together to create a pulsing. If they're tuned just right, the pulsing is a brain speed. Then that becomes brain entrainment. So this would be what we call a monophonic binaural beat. Two tones and a single sound source, as opposed to two tones as we know them through two separate speakers interacting in air molecules. This is interacting within the metal. Two separate tones arising together, interacting within this metal and broadcasting out a pulse that we entrain to. So now you can tell which are the good bowls and which are the bad bowls by the speed of that pulse. good, clear, this is a low, I would say this is an upper theta pulse. Wow, 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 wow. That's a good meditation state. This one, this is slower, and it's got a sub-pulse that's a delta pulse. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Another one on top of whoa, 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 whoa. So it's actually making a mini mind mirror pattern, forming a brain pattern of meditation that's even more complex. Now, back in the old days, when the first crystal bowls started coming out, that was back in the mid-'80s or late '80s. I moved to California in 1988, and the first ones were starting to come out around that time. And those are made of crystal, and the sides are straight. There's no curve, the side is straight. So it's a good, clean tone, but it has no binaural beat thing going on. It has no pulsing in it like these do. So the real secret of these guys is the tonality because of the alloy mix and the shape creating the binaural beats. If you've got a crystal bowl, crystal's cool, I get that. The sound that comes from a crystal is a unique thing all of its own that centers your mind instead of metal. But there's no curve, so it's just a tone, and there's no binaural beat portion to that. Although you could, if you wanted, manufacture different bowls and play the two at the same time and create true binaural beats with a wah-wah between them. But that's not how it all started. How it all started was these were crucibles from a metal casting foundry. Somebody visited one and saw the cool crystal bowl thing there that was a crucible for molten metal to pour in, and got one and took it home and started rubbing it and realized, wow, this is like a Tibetan bowl. This is awesome. And so pretty soon you were in business, buying these things from foundries and putting them out in the new age holistic healing circuit. And initially claiming that this was designed to change your consciousness, which it really was not at all. But that's human beings. Later it caught on, and people were making really good living at a big company making, putting out these bowls. So pretty soon they started making their own bowls. And that's when that turned into a real business where, and then it boils down to who knows what they're doing and do they know anything? So now you could tune two separate bowls, cast two separate bowls, play them together and create a binaural beat. So this concept of portable 7 chakra colored singing bowls, I am assuming there's 7 different bowls and each one is in the color of one of the chakras. Now it all boils down to who made them and what do they know. Like one of the first things to be aware of is that there's a claim, well, the ancient texts tell us that each of the chakras is a metaphysical energy vortex spinning at a certain speed that creates a certain tone and generates a certain color. So, for instance, the first chakra is red, has a certain tone. And when you, as a scientist, I'm thinking, well, okay, there's an octave relationship between a tone and 45 octaves higher in an angstrom frequency range color, that those are related as octaves. So if I could find the frequency, of red, and then drop it by 45 octaves, I'd have the tone for the first chakra, right? There's 2 problems with that. Number one, excuse me, what shade of red are we talking about? Because when you analyze the electromagnetic spectrum of color, which is 450 to 700 nanometers, or angstroms, millions of cycles per second, and you just take the red zone, which is 400 to I don't know what, 300 and 400 or whatever, there is no discrete division between all the shades of red that you can have in there, from bright red to maroon and everything in between. There's an infinite number of angstrom frequencies of red in there. And so when you're talking about the chakra is tuned to red, what red are you talking about? I mean, is it like bright red at this end, or is it maroon, or is it dead center in the middle? If I take where red ends, comes the next color, and I take those frequencies and divide it in half mathematically, is that the red we're talking about? In reality, the red of your chakras is tuned to your own system. There is no standard red except on the bell curve of a large number of people, where you measure their root chakra to find out what shade red is everybody, and plot it on a bell curve and say, it's middle red, halfway between. But 20% of the people aren't going to fall into that at all. It's going to be maroon here, and it's going to be this and that there. And then you would have to take that individual and calculate what red they are down 45 octaves and generate the tone for that red for you. And do that with 1,000 people and come up with a bell curve of one that would work for most people on a bell curve. Yeah, but nobody's done that. You know, we all know that nobody's done that. It's channeled, or it's, I don't know what, it's intuitive, or the second problem is that electromagnetism that governs color in this frequency, and sound, which is not electromagnetic and not on the electromagnetic spectrum, are the two primordial building blocks of the whole universe, the big yin-yang, photons and phonons, light and sound, the two big forces of the universe. Sound is pure energy moving through a medium at a certain frequency, through a certain material. So therefore, there is no direct octave relationship between the two. It's apples and oranges until you do a mathematical calculation of the angstrom frequency color multiplied by the speed of light, convert it around mathematically, and now it's apples and apples, and now you can make that calculation. And I guarantee to you, most of the Tom, Dick, and Harrys out there in the New Age holistic world who come up with the bright idea there's an octave relationship don't know about that part and make a mistake. And once again, it's just human beings. It's what separates the men from the boys. It's what separates an amateur from a professional. The professional digs and digs and digs until they have learned the last possible iota of everything that has to do with this subject matter at hand, so they don't what? Make any mistakes. Don't make a noob mistake, falling into a greenhorn sort of pitfall, that you cross all the T's and dot all the I's and make no mistakes. And if you don't know, you consult somebody who does. So you do it right. So anyway, thank you for bearing with me through this little section here. I know we've gone long and long and long beyond. And we'll see you here next Sunday at 12:30. So peace and blessings to all. And thank you all for coming back and spending some time with me here. And with that, we sign off.